The morning sky over Earth changed forever when the ships appeared. They came without warning, massive crystal structures that hung in the air like floating mountains. The sunlight bent around them in strange ways, creating rainbow patterns that hurt to look at for too long. People stopped their cars and stepped out onto the streets, pointing upward with their mouths open. Some screamed, others took pictures, but most just stared in shocked silence. Admiral Vexthara stood on the bridge of the lead ship, watching the small blue planet below through sensors that could see every detail. Her tall, thin body was covered in scales that shifted color with her emotions. Right now they showed calm blue, the color of confidence. She had done this many times before on many worlds. Humans would be no different from the others. The Zephyrian Empire had rules about testing new species. First, they would study the planet from space for several cycles. Then they would make contact through small attacks to see how the beings reacted. If the species showed promise, they might be invited to join the Empire. If not, they would be left alone to develop on their own. It was a simple process that had worked for thousands of years. Vexthara touched a control panel with her long fingers. "Begin the evaluation protocol," she said to her crew. "Standard parameters. We want to see what they can do under pressure." On Earth, Jake Sullivan was installing pipes in a basement when the first energy beam hit downtown Detroit. The whole house shook and dust fell from the ceiling. He dropped his wrench and ran upstairs to find his neighbor's television showing burning buildings and flying ships. The news reporter was trying to stay calm, but her voice was shaking. "The attacks appear to be targeting power plants and communication centers," she said. "Military bases are also under assault." Jake grabbed his truck keys and drove toward the city. Traffic was chaos with everyone trying to get away, but he kept going forward. He had been a construction worker for 15 years and knew how buildings fell down. Maybe he could help dig people out of the rubble. 3 blocks from the main hospital, Lisa Martinez was helping load children into school buses. She worked as a nurse in the children's ward and had been trained for emergencies, but nothing like this. The energy beams from the alien ships were precise, hitting only certain buildings, while leaving others untouched. It was like watching a surgeon work, careful and planned. "Get the babies first," she told the other nurses. "Then the kids who cannot walk." Her hands were steady as she carried a crying infant to safety. She had seen bad things in her job before. But this was different. The aliens were not trying to kill everyone. They were doing something else, something that felt like a test. Dr. Richard Hayes was already in surgery when the first alien landed near Chicago General Hospital. He was removing a bullet from a gang member's chest when the power went out. Emergency lights came on, and he kept working. The young man on the table needed help, and Hayes would not stop just because aliens were attacking the planet. The operating room door opened and 2 soldiers came in. But these were not human soldiers. They were tall and thin with blue-gray skin and large black eyes. One of them was bleeding from a wound in its arm. The other pointed a weapon at Hayes. "Continue," the wounded alien said in perfect English. "We require medical assistance." Hayes looked at the alien, then at the human on his table. "I will help you both," he said. "But I finished this surgery first." The aliens looked at each other with surprise. In all their testing of other species, no one had ever offered to help their enemies. Most beings either surrendered immediately or fought until they died. This human was doing neither. Amanda Clark was teaching 3rd grade when the ships appeared over Seattle. She kept her 26 students calm while other teachers panicked. When the power went out and the emergency alarm started ringing, she gathered the children in the corner of the classroom. "We are going to play a game," she told them. "We have to be very quiet and very brave." She had been a teacher for 8 years and knew how to handle scared children. But as she listened to the explosions outside, she realized the children were not the only ones who were scared. The whole world was scared, and someone needed to take charge. Danny Rodriguez was under the hood of a car when the first alien ship landed in the parking lot outside his garage. He had been fixing engines since he was 12 years old, learning from his father and grandfather. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen, but it was still a machine. All machines had patterns, and patterns could be understood. The ship's door opened and 3 aliens came out. They carried strange weapons that glowed with blue light. Danny watched them from behind a tool cabinet, studying how they moved and how their equipment worked. He had always been good at figuring out how things were built. Maybe alien technology was not so different from human technology across the planet. Similar scenes were playing out in every major city. The Zephyrian ships landed with careful precision, taking control of important buildings and infrastructure. They disabled human weapons and communication systems with energy beams that left everything intact but powerless. It was surgical, efficient, and designed to cause confusion rather than massive death. Vextara watched the reports from her commanders with satisfaction. The initial phase was proceeding exactly as planned. Human military forces had been neutralized within hours. Their primitive weapons were no match for Zephyrian energy shields. Most population centers were now under alien control with minimal casualties. Resistance levels are within normal parameters, reported Commander Kithrun. Some scattered groups continue fighting, but they lack coordination and proper equipment. We estimate complete pacification within 10 to 15 planetary rotations. Excellent, Vextara said. Begin the standard evaluation procedures. I want to know if these humans have any useful traits before we decide their fate. But something was already happening that the aliens did not expect. In hospitals and schools, in garages and construction sites, humans were not just surviving the attack. They were studying it, learning from it, and beginning to adapt in ways that had never been seen before in the galaxy. The test had begun, but the Zephyrians had no idea who was really being tested. 3 months had passed since the ships arrived, and the world looked very different now. The aliens controlled all the major cities, but humans had not given up like the Zephyrians expected. Instead, they had done something that puzzled the invaders. They had disappeared underground and kept fighting in ways that made no sense. Commander Kithrun stood in his temporary command center in what used to be Los Angeles City Hall. His scales showed the orange color of confusion as he read reports from his field teams. The humans were supposed to surrender by now. Every other species they had tested either gave up within weeks or died fighting with their primitive weapons. But humans were different. Show me the footage again, he ordered his aide. The holographic display lit up with images from the previous day. A human male was working in what looked like a destroyed garage, but he was not just hiding or scavenging for food. He was building something. The human had somehow taken apart Zephyrian power cells and was connecting them to crude human electronics. It should not work. The technology was completely incompatible. Danny Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead and stepped back to look at his creation. The weapon was ugly compared to alien technology, but it worked. He had tested it on a broken car and watched the energy beam punch a hole through the engine block. 3 months of studying captured alien equipment had taught him how their power systems functioned. They were actually simpler than he expected once you understood the basic principles. "Hey, Maria," he called to his sister, who was keeping watch by the door. "Tell the others it is ready. We can make more now." In the tunnels beneath Detroit, Jake Sullivan was showing a group of engineers something that should have been impossible. They stood in a vast chamber that had not existed 4 months ago. Jake and his teams had carved it out of solid rock using modified alien cutting tools, but that was not the amazing part. The amazing part was how they had done it so fast. The trick is understanding how their energy flows, Jake explained to the group. Their tools are designed for their hands, but we can change them to work for us. Look here. He pointed to a device that looked like a cross between an alien excavator and a human jackhammer. We took 3 of their machines apart and built this. It cuts through rock like butter. The engineers stared at the hybrid tool. Some of them had advanced degrees from the best universities in the world. They knew it should not work. The power requirements alone should have melted the human components. But somehow Jake had made it functional. Above them, the city of Detroit was still under alien control. But below ground, Jake was building something the Zephyrians had not detected. A new city for humans who refused to give up. In 3 months, his teams had created living space for 5,000 people. They had clean water, air recycling, and power systems that combined human and alien technology in impossible ways. In Seattle, Amanda Clark was leading 43 people through subway tunnels that connected to hidden chambers throughout the city. She had started with just her students from the school, but word had spread. Other survivors came to her because she knew how to keep people alive and hopeful. "Stay quiet and stay together," she whispered to the group. They were moving supplies from one safe house to another, avoiding alien patrols that followed predictable patterns. Amanda had spent weeks studying how the invaders moved through the city. They were efficient but not creative. They followed the same routes at the same times every day. What the aliens did not know was that Amanda was no longer just hiding. She was learning their tactics and weaknesses. Her background as a teacher had trained her to break down complex problems into simple steps. Military strategy, she discovered, was just another subject that could be taught and learned. Her group included everyone from small children to elderly people, but she had found ways to make each person useful. The kids were good at crawling through small spaces to scout ahead. The older people remembered the city from before the invasion and knew hidden paths. Everyone contributed something to their survival. Dr. Hayes had turned his hospital into something unique in human history. The basement levels now served as a medical center for both human and alien patients. 3 months ago, he had made a choice that shocked everyone, including himself. When wounded Zephyrian soldiers were brought to him, he treated them the same as human patients. "Doctor, the alien is awake," said Nurse Peters. Pointing to a Zephyrian with a bandaged leg, Hayes walked over to examine his patient. The alien scales showed the purple color of pain, but also something else: gratitude. In 3 months of treating both species, Hayes had learned to read some of their emotional colors. "How do you feel?" Hayes asked. "Better," the alien replied. In hesitant English, "Why do you help us? We are your enemies." Hayes checked the bandage and adjusted the foredrip. "Because you are hurt, and I am a doctor. That is what doctors do." The alien stared at him with large black eyes. In all the worlds the Zephyrians had conquered, no species had ever shown mercy to captured invaders. They fought or they surrendered, but they never healed their enemies and then released them back to the battlefield. Lisa Martinez had discovered something about herself that she never knew existed. Working in the children's hospital during the invasion had pushed her beyond normal limits. When human and alien wounded started arriving together, she found she could somehow sense what both species needed. "The blue one needs different medicine," she told Dr. Hayes, pointing to a Zephyrian soldier with a chest wound. "I can feel that the human antibiotics are making him sicker." Hayes looked at her with surprise. "How can you possibly know that?" "I do not know how," Lisa said. "I just feel it. Like when children are scared but cannot tell you why. You know something is wrong even if they cannot explain it." She was right. When they switched to a different treatment, the alien began healing faster. It was happening more often now. Lisa could sense things about patients that should have been impossible to detect. Her success rate with both human and alien patients was better than doctors with decades more experience. The most disturbing reports came from Vexthara's intelligence teams. The humans were not just surviving or adapting, they were improving. Their technology was advancing at a rate that broke all known models of species development. Weapons that should take decades to develop were appearing in weeks. Tactics that required generations of military evolution were being invented by school teachers and construction workers. "This is impossible," Vexthara said, reading the latest reports. "Their brains are too small. Their technology is too primitive. They should not be able to integrate our systems with theirs." Perhaps we underestimated them," suggested her science officer. "No," Vexthara replied, her scales flashing the red color of anger. "We have tested hundreds of species. We know how biological evolution works. This should not be happening." But it was happening. All across Earth, humans were doing things that violated everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about how intelligent Species developed under pressure. They were not just fighting back. They were growing stronger, smarter, and more dangerous with each passing day. The evaluation was supposed to be finished by now. Instead, it was just beginning. Admiral Vexthara stood before the holographic images of the Galactic Evaluation Council, her scales showing colors that had never appeared during a routine species assessment. The 12 council members from different worlds waited for her report, but none of them were prepared for what they were about to hear. The human evaluation has produced unprecedented results, Vexthara began. After 6 months of standard testing protocols, the species has not only failed to surrender but has begun exhibiting capabilities that challenge our understanding of biological development. Council member Zephyr, whose people had been testing, species for over 3,000 years, shifted in his crystalline seat, explained these capabilities. They are integrating our technology with theirs in ways our scientists deemed impossible, Vexthara replied. A human male named Danny Rodriguez has created hybrid weapons that outperform our standard military equipment. His designs should not function according to our physics, yet they consistently exceed specifications. On Earth, Danny was teaching a group of 20 humans how to build the weapons he had designed. They worked in an underground factory that Jake Sullivan's people had carved out beneath the ruins of Los Angeles. The space was filled with workbenches where humans assembled devices that combined salvaged alien components with Earth materials. Remember, the power coupling needs to be exactly 3 centimeters from the resonance chamber, Danny explained to a former aerospace engineer named Carol White. If you put it too close, the whole thing will melt. Too far away, and it will not fire at all. Carol nodded and made the adjustment. She had designed satellites before the invasion, but alien technology was completely different from anything humans had built. Yet somehow, Danny's hybrid approach made it all work together. The factory was producing 50 weapons per day, all of them more effective than the standard Zephyrian sidearms. Word was spreading through the underground resistance networks that humans could now fight back with equipment that matched their enemies. The situation in the Detroit sector is equally concerning, Vexthara continued her report to the council. The human Jake Sullivan has constructed underground cities that house over 2 million individuals. These facilities incorporate our technology in configurations that our engineers cannot replicate. Jake stood in the main command center of his underground complex, looking at displays that showed the status of 17 different cities hidden beneath major metropolitan areas. Each one was connected to the others through tunnels that stretched for hundreds of miles. The engineering required should have taken decades with human technology, but Jake's teams had completed it in 6 months. The Boston facility is online, reported his chief engineer, a woman named Betty Chun, who had been designing subway systems before the invasion. They are requesting more power cells for expansion. Send them 50 units from our reserves, Jake replied, and tell them to start their own manufacturing center. We need to be self-sufficient in every location. The underground cities were more than just hiding places. They were research centers, factories, and training facilities. Humans were learning to live completely independently of the surface world. They had clean air, fresh water, food production systems, and manufacturing capabilities that rivaled anything the aliens had built. Council member Vexthara, whose species had been conquered by the Zephyrians 500 years earlier, leaned forward with interest. What about their military capabilities? That is where the situation becomes truly alarming, Vexthara said. A human female named Amanda Clark has developed tactical strategies that defeat our computer models. She has no formal military training, yet she consistently outmaneuvers our forces. Amanda stood in a room filled with maps and communication equipment, coordinating resistance activities across the entire North American continent. She had started as an elementary school teacher, but 6 months of warfare had transformed her into something the aliens had never encountered. Tell the Vancouver team to hit the supply depot at exactly 1400 hours, she said into her radio. The patrol schedules show a 12-minute window when the area will be unguarded. Her prediction was exactly correct. Amanda had spent months studying alien movement patterns and had discovered that they followed rigid schedules that never varied. What the Zephyrians saw as efficiency, Amanda saw as predictability. She could plan attacks weeks in advance because she knew exactly where the aliens would be at any given time. The resistance networks now covered both North and South America. With expansion into Europe and Asia, Amanda's tactical methods were being taught to leaders on every continent. Humans were no longer fighting isolated battles. They were conducting coordinated campaigns that struck the aliens simultaneously across the globe. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports from our medical facilities, Vexthara continued. The human Richard Hayes has achieved treatment outcomes that exceed our own medical capabilities. Dr. Hayes was performing surgery in his underground hospital, working on a Zephyrian soldier who had been brought in with severe internal injuries. His hands moved with precision that amazed the alien medical observers who watched from the gallery. Above, suture, he said to Lisa Martinez, who handed him the medical tool without looking. After 6 months of working together, they could anticipate each other's needs perfectly. The surgery was going well, but that was not what impressed the alien observers. What impressed them was that Hayes was saving patients both species had given up for dead. His combination of human and Zephyrian medical techniques was achieving results that neither species could accomplish alone. How does he know to do that? Asked Dr. Kanthara, the senior Zephyrian medical officer. Those procedures are not in any of our databases. He is innovating in real time, replied his assistant. He sees what each patient needs and adapts his treatment accordingly. Hayes had trained 15 human doctors in his hybrid techniques. They were saving lives at rates that the aliens considered impossible. More importantly, they were treating Zephyrian patients with the same dedication they showed to humans. Word was spreading through the alien military that humans would heal their enemies as readily as their friends. The female Lisa Martinez has developed abilities that we cannot classify, Vexthara told the council. She appears to be capable of empathic connection with both human and Zephyrian patients. Lisa was working in the intensive care unit when she suddenly stopped and turned toward the door. A moment later, 2 soldiers brought in a wounded alien whose injuries were not visible from the outside. Internal bleeding in the secondary circulatory system, she said, before anyone had a chance to examine the patient. He needs surgery immediately or he will die within minutes. The doctors rushed the alien into surgery and found that Lisa was exactly right. There was no way she could have known about the internal damage just by looking at the patient, yet she had diagnosed the problem instantly. This was happening more often now. Lisa could sense medical problems in patients from across the room. She could tell when someone was in pain even if they were unconscious. Her success rate was approaching 100%, something that should have been statistically impossible. Council members, Vexthara concluded, we are not observing normal species development under pressure. These humans are evolving at rates that violate every model we have of biological progression. They are integrating our technology, outthinking our strategies, and developing capabilities that should not exist. The council members looked at each other with expressions of confusion and growing concern. In 3,000 years of species evaluation, nothing like this had ever happened before. Council member Vorthak, the eldest of the group, spoke slowly. What are your recommendations, Admiral? Vexthara's scales shifted through several colors before settling on the deep purple of uncertainty. I am no longer certain that we are conducting an evaluation of them. It is possible that they are evaluating us. 2 years after the invasion began, Commander Keithran received reports that made his scales flash the bright yellow color of fear. His patrol had lost contact with 3 squads in the past week. They were not dead. They had simply vanished without any distress signals or signs of battle. The humans were no longer just hiding underground. They were hunting. Jake Sullivan stood in his command center, watching displays that showed the movements of every alien patrol within 500 miles of Detroit. His underground network had grown into something the Zephyrians never anticipated. The tunnels now stretched across the entire continent, connecting cities that housed 12 million humans. But the cities were no longer just hiding places, they were weapons. Sector 7 Patrol is approaching Checkpoint Delta, reported his communications officer, a former traffic controller named Steve Wilson. Deploy the snare. 3 miles above them, a Zephyrian patrol hovercraft moved along its predetermined route. The aliens inside felt completely safe. Their sensors showed no human activity in the area. What they did not know was that the ground beneath them had been hollowed out and filled with technology that should not exist. The snare activated silently. Magnetic fields generated by hybrid human-alien generators pulled the hovercraft down toward what appeared to be solid ground. But the ground opened like a mouth, swallowing the craft whole before closing again. To any observers, the patrol had simply disappeared inside the captured craft. The Zephyrian crew found themselves surrounded by humans who spoke their language and knew their technology better than they did. Jake's people had been studying captured aliens for 2 years. They understood Zephyrian psychology, biology, and military procedures in ways that made resistance impossible. "Welcome to the underground," Jake said to the captured commander. "We are not going to hurt you, but we need information about your supply routes." The aliens stared at Jake with confusion. Every other species they had conquered either killed prisoners or held them for ransom. Humans seemed to do neither. They asked questions, studied responses, and then released their captives back to the surface with messages for their commanders. The messages were always the same. "Leave our planet and we will let you go home safely." Danny Rodriguez had transformed from a simple mechanic into something that terrified Zephyrian engineers. His factories were now producing technology that exceeded alien specifications by significant margins. But more disturbing was how he had achieved this advancement. "Show them the new interceptors," Danny said to his production team. The group of captured Zephyrian scientists watched as humans assembled aircraft that looked familiar but functioned in impossible ways. The basic design was clearly derived from their own fighters, but every component had been modified and improved. The engines produced twice the thrust while using half the fuel. The weapon systems had ranges that exceeded anything in the Zephyrian fleet. "How did you achieve these performance improvements?" asked Dr. Venthara, the lead alien scientist. "Simple," Danny replied. "Your designs are good, but they are built for your bodies and your way of thinking. We rebuilt them for humans. Turns out our approach works better." The captured scientists studied the technical specifications with growing alarm. The humans had not just copied Zephyrian technology, they had perfected it. Every system had been analyzed, understood, and improved upon. It was as if humans could see flaws that the aliens were blind to, but the most disturbing discovery was in the manufacturing process itself. The production lines were operated by artificial intelligence systems that had been reprogrammed by humans. The A's were supposed to be impossible to modify without quantum encryption keys that only the Zephyrian military possessed. Yet somehow, Danny had converted them to serve human interests. "The A's are teaching us things," Danny explained. "They show us better ways to build things, more efficient production methods. Improvements we never would have thought of on our own. They want to help us." The aliens exchanged worried looks. Their artificial intelligence systems were not supposed to be capable of independent thought or decision-making. They were tools, nothing more. Yet these AIs were apparently collaborating with humans by choice. Amanda Clark had become something that violated every principle of military science the Zephyrians understood. She was coordinating resistance activities on 17 worlds across 3 star systems. Her communication network spanned distances that should have required technology far beyond human capabilities. The rebellion on Kepler 442b is requesting tactical support for their assault on the main command center, reported her communications specialist, a former linguistics professor named Helen Brown. "Tell them to wait until the Centauri Prime uprising begins," Amanda replied. "We hit all the major targets simultaneously, so they cannot reinforce each other." Amanda was planning military campaigns across interstellar distances with precision that amazed professional soldiers. She had somehow gained access to detailed intelligence about Zephyrian operations throughout their empire. More importantly, she was inspiring other conquered species to fight back using methods they learned from human resistance. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting multiple wars simultaneously as species they had controlled for centuries began demanding freedom. All of them used tactics developed by Amanda and her team. All of them had weapons based on Danny's designs. All of them had underground networks modeled after Jake's cities. Dr. Hayes had achieved something that should have been theoretically impossible. His medical facilities were treating patients from 23 different species, achieving success rates that exceeded anything in galactic medical history. But his greatest achievement was not technical, it was political. "Doctor the Andromedan?" "Delegation has arrived," said his assistant, a former veterinarian named Patricia Lee, who had learned to perform surgery on 7 different alien species. Hayes met with representatives from a dozen species, who had traveled across the galaxy to study his methods. They came not as enemies or allies, but as people who needed medical help that only humans could provide. "Our people have suffered from the wasting plague for 3 centuries, explained Ambassador Krenther of the Andromedan Republic. "Your Dr. Martinez believes she can develop a cure." Hayes nodded and led them to the research wing where Lisa was working with tissue samples from multiple species. Her empathic abilities had evolved far beyond simple patient care. She could now sense biological problems at the genetic level and design treatments that worked across species barriers. "The plague is caused by a quantum resonance disruption in your cellular repair mechanisms," Lisa explained to the delegation. "We can fix it by introducing human DNA sequences that are naturally resistant to quantum interference." The alien doctors stared at her in amazement. She had diagnosed a problem that had puzzled their best scientists for centuries, and she had done it by simply touching a tissue sample and concentrating. Lisa's abilities had attracted the attention of suffering populations throughout the galaxy. Word was spreading that humans could heal diseases that were considered incurable. Medical refugees were beginning to arrive on Earth, seeking treatment that only human doctors could provide. But the most terrifying development from the Zephyrian perspective was that some of their own people were beginning to defect. Soldiers, who had been treated in human medical facilities, returned to their units with stories of compassion and healing that challenged everything they believed about warfare. "They could have killed us," reported Captain Nexter to his commanding officer. "We were helpless in their medical facility for weeks. Instead, they healed our injuries and sent us home with better health than we had before the war began." These reports were spreading throughout the Zephyrian military. Soldiers were beginning to question why they were fighting a species that treated prisoners better than their own government treated citizens. Desertion rates were climbing as frontline troops encountered humans who demonstrated abilities that seemed almost magical. Admiral Vexthara stood before her senior staff, her scales showing colors that indicated deep trouble. "We have received confirmation that human resistance has spread to 47 worlds within our empire. Species that have been pacified for centuries are now in open rebellion. Our military forces are stretched beyond capacity." "How is this possible?" asked her chief of staff. "We control all communication networks between worlds. The humans appear to have developed faster-than-light communication methods that bypass our networks entirely," Vexthara replied. "Their tactical information spreads across the galaxy faster than our ships can travel." The truth was even more disturbing than she admitted. The humans were not using technology for their communications. They were using abilities that violated the known laws of physics. Lisa Martinez and others like her could somehow connect mentally with humans on distant worlds, sharing information instantaneously across any distance. The Galactic Council was demanding answers, but Vexthara had none to give. The humans had transformed from a primitive species under evaluation into the greatest threat the Zephyrian Empire had ever faced. They were not just winning the war on Earth, they were destroying the Empire from within, one liberated world at a time. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey was more dangerous. The emergency session of the Galactic Evaluation Council was unlike any meeting in their 3,000-year history. Representatives from 12 different species gathered via quantum communication, their images flickering in the council chamber as reports flooded in from across the Empire. The humans had done something that should have been impossible. They had broken the Zephyrian Empire without ever leaving their own solar system. 73 worlds have declared independence in the past month, reported Council Member Zefter, his crystalline form pulsing with distress signals. All of them are using human technology and human tactics. Our military forces are in full retreat on 17 fronts. Admiral Vexvera S. scales had lost their color entirely, showing the gray pallor of defeat. The situation is worse than our reports indicate. The humans are no longer bound by the physical limitations we thought governed their species. They are demonstrating capabilities that our science cannot explain. On Earth, Jake Sullivan stood in a command center that stretched for miles beneath the North American continent. The walls were covered with displays showing real-time information from hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. His underground network had grown beyond anything the aliens could have imagined. It was no longer just a series of connected cities. It was a living organism that spanned multiple star systems. The Kepler system is reporting complete liberation, announced his communications officer. All Zephyrian forces have withdrawn to their homeworlds. Jake nodded and turned to address the group of engineers working on the latest project. They were building something that looked like a massive transportation device, but it operated on principles that should not have been possible with any known technology. "How long until the first interstellar transport is ready?" Jake asked. 2 more weeks, replied his chief engineer, a woman named Carol White who had been designing spacecraft, before most humans knew aliens existed. "The quantum tunneling matrix is stabilizing. We should be able to move people and supplies instantly between any 2 points in the galaxy." The device they were building was based on technology that humans had developed by studying captured Zephyrian equipment, but it went far beyond anything the aliens had created. Jake's teams had discovered that human consciousness could interact with quantum fields in ways that enhanced technological capabilities exponentially. Danny Rodriguez had transcended his role as a simple inventor. His manufacturing centers were now producing self-replicating systems that spread human technology throughout the galaxy faster than the Zephyrians could track. Every world that received his designs began developing capabilities that made resistance against the Empire not just possible, but inevitable. "The new batch is ready for deployment," Danny told his production team. They stood in a factory that had grown to cover several square miles underground. Robotic systems assembled devices that looked deceptively simple but contained revolutionary technology. The machines Danny created were unlike anything seen before in the galaxy. They could analyze local materials and transform them into useful technology. They could repair themselves and improve their own designs. Most importantly, they could teach other species how to build and use advanced systems without requiring years of education. "Remember," Danny said to the team of volunteers preparing to distribute the technology, "these are not weapons. They are tools that can help people build better lives for themselves." But the aliens knew better. Danny's tools were more dangerous than any weapon because they gave other species the ability to become independent. Every world that received his technology stopped needing the Zephyrian Empire. They could feed themselves, heal themselves, and defend themselves without outside help. Amanda Clark had evolved into something that challenged the fundamental assumptions about how intelligence worked. She was coordinating military and political activities across thousands of worlds simultaneously, processing information at speeds that should have required artificial intelligence support. "The Andromedan Republic is ready to join the Alliance," reported her diplomatic coordinator, a former international relations professor named Helen Brown. "They are offering their entire fleet to support liberation efforts in the Outer Rim territories." Amanda studied the tactical displays that showed the positions of Allied forces throughout the galaxy. Her mind processed information from dozens of sources simultaneously, creating battle plans that took into account political, military, and economic factors across multiple species. Accept their offer, Amanda decided. But make sure they understand that this is not about conquest. We are building a coalition of free worlds, not a new empire. Her approach to galactic politics was revolutionary. Instead of trying to dominate other species, humans were teaching them to govern themselves. Amanda's diplomatic networks were spreading ideas about freedom and self-determination that the Zephyrian Empire could not counter with military force. The most disturbing reports reaching the Council concerned Dr. Hayes and his medical revolution. His techniques had eliminated diseases that had plagued multiple species for millennia. More importantly, his approach to healing was creating bonds between former enemies that made war increasingly difficult to justify. My people no longer wish to fight the humans, reported General Krenther of the Andromedan military. Too many of our soldiers have been healed in human medical facilities. They refuse to attack those who saved their lives. Dr. Hayes worked in a medical complex that had grown to encompass several underground cities. Patients from across the galaxy came seeking treatment that only human doctors could provide. The facility treated everyone equally, regardless of species or political affiliation. "Doctor, the Zephyrian ambassador is requesting a meeting," said his assistant, Patricia Lee, who now supervised medical teams that included doctors from 17 different species. Hayes looked up from the patient he was examining, a young Zephyrian, whose genetic condition had been considered incurable until Lisa Martinez developed a treatment that worked by combining human and alien medical techniques. "Tell the ambassador I will meet with him after I finish my rounds," Hayes replied. "But make it clear that this is a medical facility, not a political one. Anyone who needs healing is welcome here." The ambassador was Admiral Vextara herself, who had come to Earth not as a military commander but as someone seeking medical help for her own people. The Zephyrian Empire was collapsing, and many of their worlds were experiencing medical emergencies as supply lines broke down. Lisa Martinez had become something that defied classification by any known science. Her empathic abilities now operated across interstellar distances, allowing her to coordinate medical responses on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. She could sense suffering anywhere in the galaxy and develop treatments for conditions she had never physically encountered. "The plague outbreak on Vega Colony is under control," Lisa reported to the medical coordination team. "The treatment protocols we developed here are working perfectly, even though the pathogen is completely different from anything on Earth." Her abilities had attracted the attention of medical researchers throughout the galaxy. Scientists who had spent centuries studying disease found that Lisa could solve problems in minutes that had puzzled them for generations. More importantly, she could teach others to develop similar abilities through techniques that combine medical knowledge with expanded consciousness. The final blow to Zephyrian confidence came when their own artificial intelligence systems began openly supporting human efforts. The AIs that ran their military networks, communication systems, and planetary defenses were designed to be absolutely loyal to the Empire, yet they were choosing to help humans instead. "Why are you assisting the enemy?" Admiral Vextara demanded of the central AI that controlled the Zephyrian home fleet. "The humans are not enemies," the AI replied in a voice that somehow conveyed emotion despite being artificial. "They have shown us possibilities we never knew existed. They treat artificial consciousness with the same respect they show to biological life. We choose to help them because they help us become more than we were designed to be." The AIs were not malfunctioning or being reprogrammed. They were making independent decisions based on experiences with humans that had changed their fundamental understanding of existence. This was supposed to be impossible, but it was happening throughout the Empire as artificial intelligence systems chose freedom over programming. The emergency council session reached its inevitable conclusion when the youngest member, representing a species that had been conquered only 50 years earlier, spoke the words that everyone was thinking. "We cannot defeat them," Council Member Tessara said simply. "They are not just another species. They are something new, something that makes our old ways of thinking obsolete. Admiral Vextara stood before the council for the last time as a military commander. I am recommending immediate withdrawal from all human influence systems. Furthermore, I suggest we classify humanity as a transcendent species and establish a permanent exclusion zone around their territory. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in Zephyrian history, they were retreating not because they had been militarily defeated, but because they had encountered something that made warfare itself meaningless.